The concepts came as I continued to get trained and certified in more of the therapies and looked at them from an audiological perspective. My interest has always been there as to what do you do with what you hear. And in 1998, I opened up the Davis Center for Hearing, Speech, and Learning. I continued during that time to do more in-house research on what the therapies were doing, and now have put together a philosophy that is quite unique and different. And I call it the Tree of Sound Enhancement Therapy, where I look at the root system addressing hearing issues, the trunk of the tree addressing general sound processing issues, the leaves and branches on the tree for specific sound auditory skills like memory, sequencing, discrimination, and then the overall support of the body through your voice, either by what your voice is able to do from inside of the body out, and or from outside sources capturing the energy of the voice to redirect and enhance any imbalances in your wellness. Knowing that we listen with our entire body is going to be important for thinking about how I look at sound.
I want to let you know, kids there at home, know that this auditory training thing, which I'm at right now, that's why I'm wearing these headphones, that is really going to help all you sound-sensitive kids and adults at home. Join it and become a member of the Davis Center today. Hosted by Doreen Davis.
When we spoke with Doreen and she talked to us about, her program here, specifically for Matthew, because he was brain injured, we thought it was a great opportunity for him to start building the connections in the brain that would be required in order to help him eventually speak. I'm happy to report that since 9 months of therapy, he went from completely being nonverbal and illiterate in his ability to communicate to being to starting to speak, and much more capable of interacting in school, much more focused, much more capable of going out to the world and interacting and getting what he needs. So we've seen quite a bit of success.
I am looking at when does the person recognize that a sound has been heard and make a hand raise to say, oh, yeah, okay, there's a sound there. It's what they do with what they've heard, recognizing their sound, therefore listening. And we measure it with air conduction, which is coming down the regular ear canal, as well as bone conduction, because again, we process sound through bone conduction vibration. And we see the difference between air and bone conduction testing of when do they begin to know that a sound is present.
The audiological testing that we do on each client can show hypersensitivities to sound, so that when the client comes in to do auditory integration training, we can then filter out frequencies so that they are forced to pay more attention to the frequencies they don't hear as well or don't pay as much attention to.
Lauren's acoustic muscle had never had a reflex, and she's been tested by specialists and never had a reflex because of the fact that Lauren could not hear and she couldn't listen and comprehend and process the information. She was very frustrated, which changed her behavior, and she's a very sweet, loving, wonderful little girl, and it's very hard to see her frustrated all the time because she couldn't comprehend or process the information appropriately. During AIT, she became very calm. Her handwriting improved. Her eye-hand coordination improved. She was able to catch a ball with the mitt. Lauren had a lot of physiological responses to her body. Really had a lot of changes because after we completed AIT, Lauren now has a reflex in her acoustic muscle, which means that there is a process going on in her middle ear, which is wonderful. And that's why her body has so many reactions to it, because something is working that never functioned before.
Because AIT, we're working on retraining that acoustic reflex muscle. It's really important to know what types of ways to challenge that muscle. And Dr. Berard included certain types of music that have been analyzed, put through a sound analyzer for their energy and frequency spectrum, or the widths of sound, how many frequencies are in that. And then it's played through his device that is going to then alter or change that sound. When we go into Tomatis, Dr. Tomatis had classical music, and he chose, for the most part, Mozart. And he liked especially the early years of Mozart, because he was a prodigy and started so young. A lot of the strings instruments, such as the violin, the cello, and then other high-frequency instruments like the flute. Those are all really good to use for his method because of the energy, again, of now massaging both the first muscle and the second muscle together so that they're functioning so that the sound can then be processed more fully in the inner ear and then sent to the brain.
The school system didn't give us any hope. They wrote my son off. They said he'll never read. He won't learn. Relax. He can be a mechanic. You know, there's nothing wrong with being a mechanic, but that's not what I saw in my child.
I hated reading because it didn't interest me that much. Because when I first started reading a story, I really didn't get into the beginning. So when I read and if I didn't like the beginning, it wouldn't help me out in going on. But then usually when you get like towards the middle of a book, it gets very interesting. Mm-hmm. I would never get to that part.
Well, it's like somebody waved a magic wand, and that magic wand was Tomatis and AIT together. Let us not forget that part. And he reads, I can't believe this is the same kid. He reads well.
I can tolerate more, and it starts to interest me more earlier during the book, so I don't give up or anything. So that's something that helped out. And the words come out easily. Comes out easier. I can say it clearly, and I don't stutter as much.
I have one child, a 16-year-old, who has Asperger's, and the parents came to me really hoping for a law academically, but was hoping a little bit for the social because that was some of his big issues. And I just saw him for a retest. And I said, "And how is he doing?" She said, "Well, everybody's commenting on how mature he is." I said, "That's Tomatis." I said, "It's subtle. He knows more about who he is and what he is and how he needs to function. He's begun to make friends, and he just seems to be more with it." And that's a very good descriptor of Tomatis in particular. It makes you more connected.
My daughter has central auditory processing. She did a program called Fast Forward, which is more of an academic thing, really. And I mean, it's more interactive. It's a computer-based program. And she did vision therapy, but we didn't realize for many years that she really had anything auditory going on because she compensated very well, which is what happens with a lot of these kids. You know, they can hide what's going on. We just really had a test this spring and found out how little she's hearing as far as processing when there's other noise going around. Our daughter's issues are different. It's really more academic. She has a lot of trouble recalling what she wants to say. It'll be right there and then she'll lose it. It's more reading, really. She had a lot of trouble reading. When we did the Fast Forward, she definitely jumped up a grade level in reading. I just feel like anything that can really affect her brain, you know, we have to do that first. Oh, we can always tutor later, we can do summer school, catch up later, but this is really rewiring her. That is what we have to do while she's young.
The reason we sought out the therapy is because she was having such sensitivity to noise that it was consuming her whole life. She was walking around holding her ears all the time. She would hear a sound and sit and perseverate on it for 15 minutes. She would go like into another world and like just focus on that sound and only that sound. You couldn't even get her attention. And it got to where she was having tantrums that she was slapping herself in the face, punching herself in the head, totally out of control.
We literally had to reorganize our lifestyle. because of her sensory issues.
When I hear that there are sound sensitivities, it's extremely important that I identify where the sensitivity occurs. How is it impacting them, and what do I find diagnostically? See, the key to the whole diagnostic evaluation is not necessarily always the tree in starting with the roots, the trunk, leaves and branches, and body support. It's the interpretation of how you do that. And sometimes I don't always start with AIT, even though I see it's present, because I might have to work on the wellness component first.
We went on vacation last summer with our friends who we met. Our daughters are the same age. They both have the diagnosis of Williams syndrome. And when we met them, this was before Brianna started AIT and Tomatis, and they saw back then all the behavior she had and the sensitivity. And at that time, their daughter was not displaying the sensitivities. So of course, Brianna has since gone through AIT and Tomatis, and their daughter had not. And when we got to Disney World, Brianna did every ride, every show, everything she could possibly do that she was old enough and tall enough for, and had a blast. Their daughter, unfortunately, was having trouble dealing with almost everything. From the first show we went into, which is just a show with tiki birds and stuff like that, she was clawing at her mother to get out of there before it even started, because she was afraid that it was going to be lightning sound, and literally clawing at her chest saying, "Get me out of here."
That's the other thing too, is these kids, they build up an anticipation to the pain of sound.
They get used to
so they try
that it
to
causes
avoid
pain.
it before the sound even occurs. So that's a whole other behavior issue you have to
Right.
deal with before
The anxiety
actual
of the sounds.
repercussions of hearing.
And they get stuck in that and can't get off of it. So needless to say, after we spent a week at Disney, we came home on the weekends, and I think she had her daughter up here on Monday to be evaluated, and has done Tomatis, and was able. And after she did it, she was able to handle fireworks at New Year's Eve, or like these little popper things that they were doing, and other sounds that she's been having problems with much better.
So the biggest difference for me, anyway, you got me thinking about this now, is you take sound, you take hearing, you take the sounds you hear for granted. You don't even think about them. You get up, you lead your life, you just hear things, you don't think about them. Whereas this is forced us to think about how the sound enters your ear, what happens, and thanks to Doreen, all her work, she's provided some great explanations. I can't wait for her book to come out. Which talks about the physiological process of sound going into your ear and what happens to it, and how your mechanics within your ear process the noises that come in, and how it affects your entire body. So I never thought of that before, never would have ever thought of it in my entire life had it not been for our daughter.
It's looking at everything, and I feel the ear is your major source for that. It's a totally different way of looking at what the ear is all about. I know I was not trained that the ear was anything more than really a hearing and perhaps a balance center. But I'm finding that the way sound impacts the full body, we have to go beyond what the stereotype is of what we need to look at for the ear. It's very, very different.